All right, I do want to bring in NewsNation political contributor Mick Mulvaney now. Mick, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Natasha.
So, Mick, you worked with Pence. What can you tell us about him and also this particular moment in time?
Yeah, I served with him in the House for a couple of years, then obviously in the White House for 4 years. One of the most genuinely nice men you are ever going to meet in your entire life. He's very competent. He's not the world's most aggressive public speaker. I think the Wall Street Journal described him this morning as sort of a mayonnaise sandwich on toast. That's not exactly something that gets people fired up. But he is one of the most genuinely sincere people you are ever going to meet. He's going to talk a lot about God and his faith today. Oftentimes when politicians talk about that, it's because them sort of putting on a suit to speak to a particular audience. This is Mike Pence. He really believes what he believes and what he's going to be talking about today. So as far as the point of time goes, it's going to be very unusual. Mike Pence is facing a unique situation. He may be the only candidate in the field that some of the voters actively dislike. Keep in mind, I don't know if it's 20%, 40% of the Republican base are convinced and have been convinced wrongly by Donald Trump that Mike Pence is responsible for Donald Trump's loss and not being in the White House. That is a really high hill to climb when you're running against your former boss. So it's going to be a fascinating dynamic to see if he does take on Trump head to head or if he just goes off and run his own race as part of, say, an effort to rebuild his credibility and build the reputation that Donald Trump took from him.
Yeah, and to that end, I do actually want to listen quickly to former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie during his 2024 launch. He spoke directly about Trump. Let's take a quick listen together.
The person I am talking about, who is obsessed with the mirror, who never admits a mistake, who never admits a fault, and who always finds someone else and something else to blame for whatever goes wrong, but finds every reason to take credit for anything that goes right, is Donald Trump. And if we don't have that conversation with you, we don't deserve to ask for your vote. We don't deserve the mantle of leadership. We don't deserve to have you think of us as people worthy of leadership.
Okay, so contrast this with so far we have this video from Mike Pence released this morning where he does not address Mr. Trump by name. There is no image of Trump that pops up here. Will he need to address Trump more directly, perhaps even today in this speech? Is that what voters need to hear from him?
Does he need to? Probably. Does he have the ability to do it? No, and that's not a slam on the former vice president. It's just not his personality. That's the first I've heard of that Chris Christie clip. That's fabulous. There's nobody else in the field who can deliver that message just like Chris did. It's not Tim Scott's demeanor. Ron DeSantis is trying to sort of get there, but it's not his nature. Nikki Haley, the same sort of thing. That was Chris Christie being Chris Christie, and voters get that, especially in Iowa and New Hampshire. And that's really him just being himself, and he can do that to Donald Trump in a way that Mike Pence probably wants to, but can't. So Mike Pence needs to be Mike Pence, and Chris Christie needs to be Chris Christie. But Chris Christie might be uniquely suited out of all of these candidates to attack Donald Trump in a way they cannot.
Interesting. I mean, what can Pence offer that Trump cannot, and vice versa?
Competence and decency. I mean, if voters thought that Donald Trump demeaned the office, if his behavior in office turn them off, if his personality turned them off, and they're looking for someone to be more presidential, whatever that word means to you or to me or to somebody else, if that's what they're looking for, you're not going to find a more presidential feeling kind of candidate than Mike Pence. Plus, he's been vice president for 4 years, so he knows more about the job than probably everybody else put together. Whether that's enough remains to be seen. And again, keep in mind, I say again, he's got this portion of the base that actively doesn't like him because of what Donald Trump did to him. And that's not something that Ron DeSantis, Chris Christie, Nikki Haley, or Tim Scott have to deal with.
You know, Mike Pence calling for the U.S. to return to conservative principles. What does that actually mean today?
That's a great question, Natasha. I saw somebody else talk about Reagan at length. They mentioned Reagan 6 or 8 times in 20 minutes. I'm 56 years old. I was never old enough to vote for Ronald Reagan. Most of the people that you need to get to vote for you in this election have never voted for Ronald Reagan. And here we've got Mike Pence talking about Abraham Lincoln. And I get it. And that's Mike Pence. And he's a smart, intellectual kind of guy. And I understand that. But I'm not sure if saying this is the party of Lincoln and the party of Reagan is going to pick up the voters that you have to have. So again, I could be wrong. I'm not running for president. We may be sitting here 2 years from now talking about what a great job Mike Pence did in his rollout and invoked Reagan, and people followed, rushed to that banner. I just don't know if the party is there right now. They're conservative, but they're not Reagan conservatives, and they're certainly not Lincoln conservatives.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.